This is how to properly answer behavioral interview questions. And these are the most common interview questions that every job, every industry, every company will be asking you. So you need to know exactly how to answer these types of questions. And keep in mind, these behavioral questions are not questions like, tell me about yourself. Why do you want to work here? What are your strengths and weaknesses? Those are totally different questions that require a different approach. So make sure you click this playlist here if you want to know how to answer all those other types of questions. Because today we're just going to be talking about behavioral interview questions. And in this video, I'm going to explain what is a behavioral question, how to answer it properly, and what are some common mistakes that I see a lot of candidates make that lead to getting them rejected. Very quickly, before we jump into the video, if you want more career tips and interview tips just like this, I post weekly career content on this YouTube channel, so make sure you click subscribe down below. All right, so first, let's explain what is a behavioral interview question so you can recognize when you're being asked one. So a behavioral interview question is any question that asks you to talk about your previous experience or anything that you have done in the past, or any question that asks you to share an example about a time that you have done something or handled a problem. You will typically know that it's a behavioral interview question because it will start with, tell me about a time when you had to do blank, or give me an example of a time where you had to do blank. Or, hey, do you have any experience doing blank? All right, now let's talk about how to properly answer a behavioral interview question. And you really need to know what the STAR interview method is. STAR is really an acronym for situation, task, action, and result. This is the general framework that you're going to use to answer this question and basically to tell a story. Now, this isn't a hard and fast rule and you don't always have to follow this. As long as you're good at storytelling, just do that. But if you're not and you want a quick guideline of how to actually structure your answer and keep it organized so that you can talk about all the important points that you need to hit when answering an interview question, I highly recommend you use STAR. Now, another common acronym for this is CAR, C-A-R, or context, action, and result. Both basically explain a general format that you would use to tell a story and answer the question, and whatever is easier for you to remember, just do that one. So because I like to advocate for the STAR method, let me just quickly break down and explain that to you, but I do have a full video on this channel explaining STAR in depth. But basically, in the situation, you're going to talk about what was the specific situation that was happening at your job and how you're going to use this example to answer the interview question that was asked. Then in the task, you're going to talk about the tasks you took to actually accomplish this project or finish these problems. And then in the A, or the actions, you're going to talk about all the technical things you've done in your role to actually accomplish those tasks and finish the project or solve the problem. This is when you're going to use and highlight all of your technical or hard skills that you may have, whether that's marketing, finance, sales, accounting, HR. The A part of your story is where you're really going to break down to them all the different skills you utilize in order to accomplish something. And then lastly, and most importantly, is the result. This is how you're going to wrap up and finish your story or your example. And you're going to want to use numbers wherever possible to quantify the result that you have had an impact to. And remember, you want to talk about the benefit that you had either to the business, the team, your manager, or the product itself. Everything should be results oriented, and if you're gonna forget any part of your overall answer and story, you definitely should not forget the result, because that is really what hiring managers and recruiters and interviewers are listening and looking for. All right, so let's talk about some common mistakes that I see people make whenever they're answering behavioral interview questions. And the very first mistake that I see is you're talking for way too long. And the biggest reason that this happens is because you don't know how long your story should be and you haven't practiced your answers. All of your interview answers for behavioral questions using the STAR method should be between 3 and 5 minutes. And if you don't know how long your story is going to be, just grab your phone, flip it around, turn it on record, and practice telling your story using situation, task, action, and result, and time yourself. You want to be somewhere within that time frame. No shorter than 3 minutes because you want to make sure you're giving enough context and highlighting all the skills you have. And no longer than 5 minutes because you don't want to ramble and you don't want to include additional information that doesn't really help you tell the story and demonstrate how good you are at your job. Another common mistake is giving a result that is very predictable or boring. So let's say the question is, tell me about a time you had a problem with your teammate and how you resolved it. We all know the ending of your story and the result will be very predictable. It will be that you had a problem with someone and then you resolved it and now you guys don't have a problem, right? It's very predictable and very boring. And so you don't want your result to just stop there. Make sure you talk about other impacts you've had on that team. Maybe by repairing this relationship, you identified a process problem, or you realized that there was a bug in the system, or you realized that there is a certain policy or procedure that needs to be revised. So don't just stop at an ending that is predictable and boring. Another huge mistake that I see when answering behavioral questions is sharing a really unimpressive or irrelevant example when it comes to answering a specific interview question. Keep in mind the context of the question and what they're trying to get from you and what they're trying to learn from you. Make sure you are sharing impressive examples that can demonstrate your skill set and show them that you are a top candidate, not just a run-of-the-mill candidate that is just like everybody else that's interviewing for the same position. Another common mistake here is using the same story or using the same situation, task, action, result to answer multiple different interview questions. Even if you're interviewing with different people, you don't want to use the same story multiple times. That's because all of these interviewers are going to be sharing notes later. And if they really like your story and it's a really powerful example, you can bet that they're all going to be talking to each other about it. And if they find out you're telling the same story over and over again, it's going to make them think that you really don't have that much experience and you actually haven't accomplished a lot, which is not what you want. Now, the next mistake, which actually happens more often than you think, is not realizing you've been asked a behavioral question and not knowing to use the STAR method. So, for example, if someone asks you, hey, have you ever done this? This is actually a behavioral question because they want you to say, yes, I have done that, and then walk them through a specific example of a time when you've done it and what great impact or result you were able to have with your company or your team or your product. So make sure you're recognizing when you need to actually share examples and make sure that you have these stories ready to go. You don't just want to answer this question by saying, yep, I've done that. Next question. And the last and really common mistake that I see, which is very unfortunate, that does lead to a lot of people getting rejected when they are qualified for roles, is not giving enough details in your actions as a part of your answer to behavioral questions. Remember, like I said at the beginning, your actions are what shows your technical skills or hard skills for this role. Accounting, sales, finance, marketing. So make sure you're giving enough time to talk about all the things that you did from a technical perspective to solve a problem or to achieve a result. This is what's going to really impress interviewers and let them know that you actually can do this job. So make sure you're focusing a lot of your time in your story on the A, or the action. Alrighty, so now you know how to answer behavioral interview questions in 2022. And if you want more career tips just like this, make sure you click subscribe down below. And don't be afraid to comment what other videos you want to see us make. I want to be as helpful for you as possible. So thank you all for watching, and don't be afraid to shake things up.